Recently, there have been more and more exciting card reveals for the Altered trading card game. Various powerful cards have gotten me excited about certain heroes, but others could still use some love. In under a month, Divine Pledge backers will receive their uncut sheets, and the full set will be spoiled. Today I'll be sharing my Altered wish list with custom cards I've made that I hope to see something similar to in the future reveals. So far, in Altered, we've seen that most decks have some cards that are a little stronger than others. Similarly, some of these reveals may be a little stronger than others, but I think none of them are completely game-breaking, and designers could strengthen or weaken them depending on if they're supposed to be one of the main cards in the deck you build around, or a more generic support card. And make sure to watch to the end, where I reveal the custom card I'd give anything to have become a real card in Altered. First up is Adena Haven Captain. I designed this card primarily for its Saudi. Adena is an 8-cost 3/3/3 from hand, but it untaps 6 mana, making it kind of like a Bravos Tracer that'll also be able to trigger out Saadi's ability. Since the hand cost is 8, even though it just has a reserve cost of 2, when you play it again, you'll still be able to draw another card as well. I've always thought that his ability to draw cards is cool, but if you're playing expensive cards that use all of your mana, you don't necessarily need a big hand. Playing multiple cards in a turn is also important in Altered to be more reactive, and with cheap removal available, expensive cards are super vulnerable unless they have a high tough value. This card fixes all of this by letting you trigger at Saadi's ability without locking you into just one card per turn. The deck could now do something similar to Traced, where you can play a lot of small characters and use your hero ability to not run out of gas. Since this card's going to be used at the start of your turn, I thought it would be cool to make it a captain because she leads the charge. The rare version plays into this theme even more. She costs a little more, but as a trade-off, she buffs the characters that come into play after her, representing how she strengthened those under her command. This is still great for its Saadi and might even make it into Basira or Kojo for the late game as well. Since these cards are locked behind 8 mana, I think they'll be relatively balanced. We've already seen a unique with an ability similar to Adena, and while the rare version could create some powerful turns, I think that's almost necessary to keep up with the crazy things that other decks are going to be doing during the late game and reward you for ramping to 8 mana. The out of faction seems like it would naturally fit into Ordis, and to make it not seem too OP, since it's basically charge on a body, I have it only boosting tokens. This is still great with Open the Gates, but not quite as universally splashable. Next, I wanted to make another spell to complement Aphanos. I called it Potion Testing, and depending on how you use it, the character it's used on can be benefited or it may blow up in their face. Aphanos has had a lot of nice reveals recently, but they mostly all require a rare slot. I think a couple more common cards would be great to fill out the deck. Something like a 1-cost fleeting spell to draw a card would work great to gain a boost and maintain your hand size, but that's not super original. So here I tried to find a way to make a spell that was weak enough it could be played and not need fleeting while still good enough to see play. We haven't really seen play from reserve effects or support abilities on spells, but I don't see a reason why they couldn't have them. From hand, this is a 1 cost that gives a boost, which is a fairly costed effect and can trigger Aphanos as well. From reserve, you get the boost again and can send to reserve a character with 2 or more boosts. In the past, we've seen cheap removal that is usually balanced by only being able to remove cards with low hand costs or only being able to remove cards with high hand costs, and only removing boosted characters seems like an equivalent restriction. If you use the boost on your characters, the removal is pretty situational, which balances out the power because your opponent's characters might not also have boosts. But you could always put the boost on your opponent's characters to set things up and be able to remove them, but if you have to do that, this card is essentially the same cost and effect as Banishing Gate, only sending the character to reserve instead of discarding it is weaker and makes up for the fact that you have the extra synergy of playing it twice with Aphanos and flexibility on how you use the effect. The support ability is there as a second way to use it from reserve. If you want to boost your own stuff the first time and end up without a good way to use it from reserve, it would be great with some of the fleeting spells, but it's probably too strong for the common and maybe should just be saved for the rare. I have it there as well, and the effect has changed now to discard 2 instead of sending to reserve. For the out of faction version, I changed the flavor a little to match Muna. It still gives a boost each time it's played, but now it gives anchored to a character with 2 or more boosts instead of sending 1 to reserve. We have a 2-cost spell that boosts 3 times and a 2-cost spell that anchors, so I don't think this is totally unreasonable for 4 mana. The cheap 1-cost boost would complement a lot of the uniques we've seen that get benefits from having multiple boosted characters, and in Tasia, the anchor effect wouldn't be too hard to trigger later because you'll already get 1 boost from her each day. Next is another Muna spell, Overgrowth. It has cost X, where X is equal to the hand cost of an opponent's permanent, and when you play it, you can discard that permanent. I think this is very thematic, with landmarks getting overgrown by Muna's many plants and deteriorating. The extra text saying you need a target to play it is just there so that no one would be able to use it as a 0 cost after you, and they'll only play it when they're using it for the intended purpose. Most removals have either hit small cost permanents and characters, or expensive permanents and characters. This one is limited limited differently in that it hits high and low cost, but only permanents. This would be pretty expensive to remove a Hive or Monolith, but I think those options are just a bonus, and this is mostly meant to counter cheap permanents like Haven, which have no economic answer in the current card pool. The rare version costs X-1, making it an even better trade into some of those meta-defining low-cost permanents, and the out-of-faction version found Yzmir. I put it there mostly because I think Yzmir really needs another way to stop Spindle Bastion, which can be pretty game warping right now. Mostly though, I just think some decks should have an answer to the low-cost permanents, and it could end up in other factions if they want to keep Muna as the no-removal faction or whatnot. I just really hope there's a strong answer to Haven somewhere. And speaking of permanents, let's take a look at Axiom Workbench. I've noticed that a lot of Axiom cards have effects based on controlling 2 landmarks or more, and that a lot of unique cards want to sacrifice permanents. I think Sierra and friends need at least 1 or 2 more permanents to consistently be able to have 2 out, and I wanted mine to feel fine as a sacrifice target as well so that it could work with those uniques. That led me to an effect where you get all of the benefit, drawing a card, up front when it's played. In Sierra, that's basically Baba Yaga as a 3-cost draw, and then it'll let you summon a 2/2/2. I think that not getting to play a body again from the reserve is made up for by the fact that it synergizes with cards that need 2 permanents out or something to sacrifice. The rare plays into this more, giving you a bug when it's sacrificed. I think this is a really fair and good support card, but if sacrifice effects only end up on uniques for now, it would definitely be too situational. With sacrifice, the oof naturally fits in Yzmir. Since we haven't seen any permanent sacrifice for them, I added that you can count it as one of your characters when sacrificing. I think this is pretty balanced and great for setting up big turns. Stargazer is a 2-cost that also gives 2/2/2 in stats when sacrificed, and this makes up for costing 3 by getting a draw as well. Next up is a support card for Waru, Zane. It's another bureaucrat, and I called it Archivist Apprentice because I wanted it to synergize with the Archivist, and it also has a similar flavor on a less expensive card. This card is a 1-cost with Defender, but it can lose Defender if you control a sleeping bureaucrat. I think a 1-cost bureaucrat would be cool because most of the others cost 4, which makes it really hard to get 2 and play with Archivist. You can sleep 1 on the previous turn, but then you still need at least 6 mana to play Archivist and another from hand on the current turn. This means it won't normally happen until at least day 4, and you won't be able to do anything else on your turn if you make that play. But with this card, you'd be able to get those combos a lot easier. The strong stats for a 1-cost could help you push an expedition even on turns where you set up a costly bureaucrat, and you could also even sleep this card as early as the first day while still playing a 2-drop to take an expedition and set up the bureaucrat train to start rolling over advantage from turn to turn. I have the rare version gaining stats in water, but it could have also gotten 1 more stat in mountain and forest instead. And the Axiom Oof rare instead checks if you have 2 or more landmarks to lose Defender. I think this card could be a lot of fun, and it would also create counterplay where opponents could remove the sleeping bureaucrat or landmark, and suddenly you'd be stuck with Defender again. And this brings us to my favorite card on the wish list, Anna, Faulty Fortune Teller. She's definitely more of a want than a need, but I think it'd be a super fun card to play. She's a 0/2/0 for 1. There are already several Lyra cards that benefit from having 3 0 stats in play, and Trickster meets this requirement on its own, but outside of her, it's pretty hard to pull it off. I think this card could be really nice because you could play it in any 2-drop with a 0 stat for a total of just 3 mana and already be set up to play some of your powerful cards. I also think that Arachne needs a good 1-drop to help you get counters quickly, but if you pull them off the top, it's usually super punishing and makes it hard to justify running them. While this card doesn't normally have an effect, the one it does have fixes this. It normally doesn't do anything, but if you happen to play this at noon with Arachne's effect, you'll get a second chance to draw a card and play one of the characters in your hand. I feel like this would be a lot of fun because it gives you 3 more copies of your best Arachne pulls and would let you hit them more consistently, but it's also useful in hand. The effect seems pretty balanced to me because you can already get Asmodeus, Shenlong, and Hydroquina off the top, and this just increases your odds a little bit more. You'd also have to hold on to one of them in your hand, or you might not have a great target anyway, which requires consideration and trade-offs during play. On the rare version, I added an effect where you can roll a die, and half the time you'll get to stack the top 3 cards of your deck, which plays into her lore as a fortune teller that can accurately predict the future. Sometimes. If you get this, it can be another way to set up a rack. Leaving it up to the dice keeps some of the randomness intact, but it might be a little too strong because you could just play this several times and wait to use a rack's effect until you've gotten the 4+. I do like though that when you pull this off the top with a rack's effect, it'll let you dig a little bit more and find the right card, which synergizes with its original use case as well. She'd also be good in Fen too because you can stack the top of your deck and optimize which cards go to hand and reserve. And the 1/3 effect of putting a card from your hand in reserve works well with things like the Hatter too. We've seen seen the ability to put cards from your hand in the reserve on Lyra unique cards, but it'd be cool to have it on a common or rare as well. If the rare version's too strong, it can be changed to just drawing 2 cards before you summon a card for free when she gets pulled off the top, or maybe even the current common version is the rare and the new common version would just let you summon a card from your hand for free, but it wouldn't draw first. I made the out of faction rare pretty different since other decks don't really have a card like Iraq. Instead, I have it synergizing with Rin's hero effect, which feels somewhat similar in style, but better matches Muna, and I changed the stats to Forest to match her as well. Now when she's put from hand to reserve, you get an effect instead of when she's summoned outside of afternoon. I also picked a weaker effect of giving something anchored as the benefit since the activation requirement is easier to meet. I really like how Copelia works in Rin since it avoids the overfilling the reserve problem, and this card feels similar. If you put her in reserve, you get the effect immediately, unlike Muna Druid or Muna Caregiver, which are fighting for precious real estate. I also added an extra cute effect where when she is discarded from the reserve, you can give a character a boost. This is another effect that synergizes with Rin and overfilling the reserve. If you use her effect and put this card there as the 3rd card, you'll be able to anchor something and then give it a boost. There's probably a whole card that could be designed around an effect that activates when it's discarded from reserve, but for now I only had 1 card left and I thought I might as well throw this idea out there too. I'm not sure if they'd actually take a Muna-U for this card in this direction, but it was fun to design and let me showcase some of the ideas going around in my head. Overall, it was a blast designing these cards. I think they'd all be balanced with little or no adjustments, and they'd all be really fun to use in a lot of decks that aren't as strong right now. I hope we see some reveals like them, or even totally different surprises that can shake up the meta for the official release. Are there any of these you wish were real, or you're worried they'd break the game? Let me know in the comments, or tell me about other effects you wish to see. You can even make your own custom cards with the custom card builder I'll link from Easy in the description. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe so I can keep bringing more altered content your way.